Chris here with Gospel Progressions University. I'm going to talk to you today about tritones. I may have spoken about this in previous videos, but this topic is something that is big to me because it's a concept, a technique that's constantly used in gospel music. And the first thing that we have to understand about a tritone is this. Say we have, for example, a C major chord, right? The two most important notes in the major chord, or just in any chord in general, are the third. We have our 1, 3, and our 5. Okay, so the third interval and the minor seventh interval. These are the two most important. Well, you may ask why. That's because the third is what gives its characteristic. One of the first things that you'll learn fundamentally in music when it comes to chord formulation is that your third, depending if it's major or the third is flatted, minor, gives the characteristics of the chord itself, okay? So we can play a C major chord, and then we add the B flat, which would be a minor 7, not the chord itself, but the interval away from C, all right? What we have now is what's called a dominant chord. Now, dominant chords are a group of chords, or belong to the group of chords, I like to say, that actually want to go someplace, okay? When you play major chords, they tend to stay or want to stay in that place, that they want to resolve. But dominant chords push the resolution, or they make it really tense where you really want to resolve. So functionally, a dominant chord would act like it's moving someplace, and it pushes the music forward. It gives a sense of tension. We play this, okay? We can go from here, from C, over to F. But if we went, for example, it pushes it more forward. The reason for that is because diatonically, C major does not have B flat in it. And when I say diatonic, I mean all the notes that are played in C major proper, there's no B flat. However, in F major, we have the fourth degree here, the fourth interval, that implies it. So if we play this here, we're implying where we're trying to go. Though that's how that works, because it pushes things forward. Another reason why it belongs to that group of chords that are taking you someplace, all right, I would like to call them mobile chords, because they always want to be resolved. They always want to take you someplace. You know, you're not going to play a dominant chord and then resolve. You're playing a C7 to resolve to C7. That's not typical. All right, you can do that. There are places that do that, but it's a technique that I would use. We're playing this C major chord, and we want to move to this, from here, we want to go to the dominant chord. To go to our F chord, we would use the tritone. Now, the tritone, again, they call it a tritone, or it's named a tritone because they are 3 tones apart, exactly. All right, 3 whole steps. Okay, so from E to F sharp is a step. F sharp to G flat, G sharp, or A flat, G sharp is a step. And from A flat, G sharp is another step to A sharp, B flat. All right, so hence the name tritone. And they're symmetrical. They're divisible by 12 because we have 12 steps, or 12 half steps in a major scale between the notes in a major scale. Of course, including the octave. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And of course, yeah, this would be 13. So there's 12 steps in between. So being that 3 is divisible, or 12 is divisible by 3, we have an angular sound. They just would keep repeating, all right? So with tritones, we invert them, they just remain a tritone. Why that's important is because they can build up on another chord, or they can be replaced with something else. Anytime you have a dominant chord, you have the 3 and the flat 7. When we invert that, it's still going to be 3 and flat 7 if C is the bass. If we change the bass from C, okay, and then we go now to G flat, the 7th for G flat becomes, which would be E, or rather the 7th for C, which is B flat, becomes the 3rd for G flat. Now I'll discuss that in another video, but what I didn't show you here or talk about there was the movement of the tritone. So to recap, the most 2 important notes in any chord are going to be the 3rd and the 7th. So this tells you exactly what the chord is. The 3rd specifically gives you the character of the chord, but the 7th what it does, it gives the color tone, because we can have a major 7, or we can have a dominant 7. Now, major 7 chords has its own color. To me, it's a warmer color than a dominant chord is more tense to me. To me, that's more of a cooler color, and it's trying to go somewhere. There's tension here. You can do that, but there's not as much, nearly as much, as it would be with a dominant chord. We can leave out the 5th. There's a reason for that. The reason is, the 1, of course, is, you know, the chord is going to, what the chord is going to be. If it's going to be C or B flat or whatever, or B. But we know that the 1 is primary. It's the root, right? So we go to the 3rd. That gives it the character, like the quality, like what kind of chord is this? Is it major or minor? So we know that it's going to be major. The 5th now can play another characteristic of a color tone. So we don't have to keep it in, but for the intents and purposes now, I want to show you where we have the C dominant chord. Again, the 5th can play a role, but we don't have to have it. In other words, chords just aren't relegated to, well, I have to play a C or invert it. This itself is a chord. A lot of people don't know that. Chords are made up of 2 or more notes. A single note, well, of course, is just a single note. So we have dyads and we have triads. The word di meaning 2, tri meaning 3. So with the dyad, we can add another note here and have a triad, a C dominant triad. So we don't have to play the 5th. When we play the 5th, there's other things that we can do with it to give it other color. But I won't talk about that. I do want to point out, though, when we use tritones, the purpose of them, okay, is to move forward. So we have the character of the chord. We know that, okay, it's a C major chord. Now it's a C dominant. So if I have a bass player and I don't feel like playing the bass for whatever reason, well, one reason would be is that I would actually want to extend my chords. Okay, so I'm playing this here and I'm applying either a C or an F sharp because they share the same tritones. That's known as what's called a tritone substitution, because you can have the same exact chord playing or the same 3 and 7 of whichever C or G flat and still remain true to the characteristics of the quality and the color of the type of chords you're playing. So when we play this now, we play our tritone. And let's just say for all intents and purposes here, we're going to play C in our bass, right? And when I say C is the bass, it's the root of the chord. You know, we can play your root here. The root doesn't have to be in the bottom. People say rootless voicing is this. Oh, there's no root. Well, there is a root. You're playing the C. C is the root. But for our example here, we have our tritone. And we just left the root out, or we moved the root from the bottom. Okay? Movements for tritones normally go in half steps in gospel music. Our tritone here wants to move. It's either going to be a diminished, all right, or it's going to be a dominant. So we're saying it's a dominant. So remember, we said we want to move from C to F. So we can either play it like this. We can go and then go to F7. We can do this, or play it like that. That's one way of doing it. When I first started to learn, you know, I would jump around the place. But with tritones in gospel music, you don't have to move around as much. So, for example, an organist would have his foot play C, then he would jump over, or she would jump over to F, all right, and then they would go over the B flat, and then move their foot over to E flat, and they could move their foot over again to A flat. We would want our tritone to move us down a 5th or up a 4th. So either way, it's the same thing. So in other words, from C, the tritone, we're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, or we're going to go down a 5th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? We're not playing this. We're going from here to move there. So many times you would have gospel players, organists, all right, play C and then go to the F chord. So what that does, it helps us to move forward in a way where everything is dominant. This wants to resolve to this, wants to resolve to this, wants to resolve here. It'll just keep going in 4ths or 5ths, depending on which direction you're moving. So the purpose of the tritone is to give the chord its characteristics of a dominant sound. This 7 chord wants to move and it wants to resolve to another 7 chord, which is a tritone away, just a half step, because we're not moving far. Again, we don't have to go C7, F7, and then B flat 7. We just go here without C in the bass, and the F, and then B flat, and then so on and so forth. The tritones help to propel us forward. To get out of it, of course, we would turn the chord. Say we did here, we went here, and then now we have a different tone because now, or a different quality of the chord. Instead of playing our B flat dominant, we're playing a B flat minor. So we're moving, and then with that minor sound, we can apply another scale or another key, depending on what we would like to do with it. So I want you to understand the purpose of tritones is for us to move forward. Number one, it creates the characteristics of the chord. It tells the ear whether the chord is a minor chord, a major chord, or dominant, or diminished. So when I hear this or this, I know I have choices. I can play a 7th chord, and I can build on that 7th chord and add other color tones, or I can play a diminished chord and build on that and add other color tones. But the purpose here, the tritones want to move forward. They do not want to just stay in one place, because we have to push them to the next thing. Again, we can stay in, do our tritones and just go back to 1. We can, plenty of times I would do a tritone movement, and I would play a chord and just, and we're not moving anywhere, but we're implying, a blues scale is kind of a churchy feel. So, that's the lowdown on tritones. There's a lot more to talk about with that. There's a lot of things that you can do on it, but it's the bread and butter of gospel. It's the bread and butter of your chord substitutions, the bread and butter of dissonance or consonance, or the bread and butter of coloring your tones. I hope that's helped you. And if it has, go check out gospelprogressionsuniversity.com/Gospel Keys Pro and go download my free guide. It's called What Do Pro Musicians Know That You Don't? And God bless you. I will see you in the next video.